Good morning, everyone. It's so nice to see all of these wonderful faces on this beautiful day. I just want to say thank you to the Milking Institute team for all the hard work to put this together. Thank you for inviting me to be the keynote. It is a pleasure and an honor. Um, I went through my books to pull up my Milking copies. For the record, both signed, so I'm very proud of that. Um, and for today, I really wanted to reinforce the theme of leadership. We're in a moment right now that is all the superlatives. It is the most frustrating, the most exciting, the most painful, the most full of opportunities, and it's full of opportunities if we're able to step into our leadership. And I want to talk about leadership differently than how we tend to talk about it. We oftentimes talk about leadership as if you have to be in a formal position of leadership. Someone has to put you in charge of other people in order for us to be leaders. And a lot of that is based on traditional ways of thinking about power, right? Power over. And this idea that there's only one pathway to power. And so if we're looking at all of the other ways that power and leadership intersect, it's also at the individual level, our responsibility as individuals to be leaders in our own lives and in the spaces that we touch, that we occupy, that we share with others. And I want to get even more specific. So Mel King named the cover, or Mel King named his poetry book, Love is the Question and the Answer. And so for me, when I think about where there are opportunities for us as leaders, is this combination of love, hope, and action. And so, and I would like to offer a slight remix to the cover of the book, to the title, and that is, you are the question and the answer. So we've been struggling through a system with that we've been trying to change and shift. And we've been talking about it, especially when it comes to this moment we're in and trying to confront racism, trying to advance racial equity. We talk about the system as if it is something separate from us that none of us are involved in. We talk about it as if it is something that we are to, fight against, and it's something over there, that somebody else is the problem, that some other organization is part of the problem. When in reality, we are all part of the system we keep talking about. And what I mean by that explicitly is we have the ability to shift and change. We're at a precipice of change right now in Boston, in this country. And in order for us to really leverage this moment, it requires all of us to take back our power, to own our power as leaders. And that means that it's about reframing the issues and seeing ourselves in them. So starting with us means that we build our self-awareness. We build our racial equity literacy to understand that there is a whole historical context to how we got to today that most of us did not learn in school. And if we have not taken the time to learn that history, no one can magically import it into our brains. We actually have to take the time to learn it. And I'm not saying everyone needs to be a historian, but there are some key moments in history that if we don't know, we don't understand, we don't have the full context on how we got to today. Why do communities look the way they look today? Why do we engage with each other in the ways that we do? Why do organizations have certain kinds of policies and practices? For every industry, for every racial equity issue, there's a whole series of historical stories that explains it all. And those series of historical stories, again, we do not learn in school. And so that's one part of racial equity literacy, is understanding the historical context of how we got to today. Because in order for us to come up with the most effective and meaningful solutions and approaches to dealing with today's problems, we need that context. Otherwise, whatever we come up with will be woefully inadequate because it doesn't have that information to ground it in the full truth, in the full variety and complexity of people, our policies, decisions we made that we are not proud of as a country, decisions we made that we're not proud of in organizations, decisions we've made as individuals that we might not be proud of. However, the opportunity for us to move forward requires us to unpack that stuff. The other part of racial equity literacy is also about understanding the relationship between that previous context and what we see today. So today, how the data informs us about racial inequities, how the data, and when I say data, I don't just mean the numbers. I also mean the qualitative data, right? So there's the context. Again, the qualitative data gives us the additional context on what the real experiences of people are in our communities, of the real strengths, of the real power, of the real everyday struggles people are going through, not just in terms of the disproportionate burden of racial inequities, but in order to fight for their communities, in order to take a position and hold people accountable, hold the traditional leaders accountable for the decisions that continue to be made using old ideas and old formulas and old ways of thinking, because that's just the way we've always done it. And so in this moment for us as leaders in our lives, because everybody's a leader, starting with our own lives, that we take the time to learn that context, to know that we are just people. And as people, we have these foundational human conditions that oppression sits on top of, that creates a whole hot messness of complexity, right? That's really hard to untangle. And here's what I mean by that. So when we think about the human condition, we are not rational beings. So I know we learned that in the 90s, behavioral economics. So it turns out that wasn't true. We're not actually rational people by default, right? We actually have a lot of logical potholes that we fall into just as people on a day-to-day basis, because our brain, especially our unconscious mind, which can drive us most of the time during the day, is looking to simplify the world for us because the world is complex. And it works fine most of the time in dealing with basic and kind of lightly complex things. But when it comes to real complex things, we need our conscious mind. We need to be in the leadership position of how we are managing ourselves and when we're engaging with each other, when we're dealing with, especially, when we talk about people are complex. So we need that conscious part of our mind to be driving the ship. We need to be present in those moments. We need to be managing ourselves and the thoughts that are inevitably running behind the scenes, that are impacting our ability to actually hear what someone in front of us is saying. We have the opportunity to put aside all of the self-doubt, all of the insecurities that get in the way of us paying attention to someone in front of us, whether it's an individual, a community, how we're confronting a decision that we have to make, right? That we're able to do that well, that we're able to develop the skills necessary to do that, because by default, we are not rational people. And if we just own that and accept that is a thing that is real, then it allows us to actually have the humility that it takes to learn the skills and tools to manage ourselves better. And I'm not saying that this stuff I'm not saying that this stuff is easy. It's hard. As someone who tries to practice what she preaches, it is hard work. It is hard to engage with people who are on a different spectrum of their human development and their racial equity literacy than you are. and stay in conversation with them and have patience with them. It's hard to be in conversation and stay there and be there with people when we think we know what's best. We think we have the answer, and none of us by ourselves really has all the answers, right? And so this opportunity for us to manage ourselves so that we can really engage with other people, because what we know and what Mel King knows is that it takes a collective of people to move work forward, right? And part of this, again, leadership starting with ourselves, leadership in that power within, our understanding of ourselves, our understanding of all of the things I just said, and owning it and having that humility. The next piece is, what does it mean to then take action? Not just random action, but like, what does it mean to take strategic action informed by our racial equity literacy, informed by where we can influence and really lean on the levers of power, of traditional power, that are going to help us really move our communities forward. And that has to happen in a way that where we actually tap into our strength, that we actually tap into our feelings and emotions about things, so that we can get over the fear of what it means to have to step out there and take action and commit. To be committed to something is scary. You have to put yourself out there even when everyone around you is doubtful, is questioning, even people that we thought were more advanced in their development and their understanding around these issues. We still have to figure out how to move the needle forward. And in order to do that, we have to put ourselves in danger, which means that for those of us who, if we're talking about what's happening right now with the disproportionate burden of Black people being killed and mistreated by the police, then we're really talking about being accomplices, right? Allies, implies that there is no danger. Accomplices is clear. There's a little bit of danger involved, right? It means that there are people in our worlds who might not want to be friends with us anymore. That means that there are going to be people in our organization, when we take full ownership of our power to act in our own spaces and in our own worlds. That means that, we might lose some supporters to our organizations. Those are sacrifices that are part of the work. And we have to be honest with ourselves about what we're willing to sacrifice as leaders who say that we believe in these issues. And the most amazing part of it is Mel King's approach around the power with, right? When we have people who are clear about their values, who are clear about the fact that they are here for the community. It's not about them, right? It's not about, taking things personally, that it's about doing the work. And when you bring a collective of people like that together, you not only multiply, you exponentially increase the impact, the movement. We're not always going to win, but the more action we take, strategic action we take, meaningful action we take, selfless acts that we take, the more likely we are to really increase the likelihood that we actually will have wins. And when we join forces together and we are able to hold firm to that vision and that goal of what it means to really do work well, what it really means to hold each other accountable with love, that being able to be in relationship with each other, conflict is involved. And conflict, there's healthy conflict, and it's necessary for us to come up with the best possible approaches and the best ideas. And that, again, it's not personal. See, the thing with leadership and traditional leadership is that there's this way out that often gets leveraged, that it's, well, I didn't do it. I'm a good person as the official leader. whether it's in an organization or whether we're talking about government. Look at all the stuff we've already done. Look at how amazing we are. Aren't you going to at least acknowledge that we've been doing good work before now? And when people take that position, what they're really saying is, I don't see myself as a full leader. I am putting my personal feelings and my personal needs ahead of the official role and position that I am in. So any criticism we get as leaders who are in official positions and are in the traditional power over roles, it's like giving up your power in the role by saying there's nothing we can do. I mean, we've done so much already, right? And really, I'm a good person, and so I'm somehow separate from the system that I'm in charge of, and that's somehow a way that we let people off the hook in leadership roles, because we see their humanity and we feel bad, when the reality is they're not practicing good leadership. They are not owning their power. They are not leveraging the resources available to them in order to make change. See, when we own our power as leaders, whether it's in formal or informal positions, we're always looking for good feedback so that we can be better and do better. We never take it personally, even though it's hard to not take it personally. Let's just be real. Like when you have put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, the initial irrational response is to take it very personally. But the reality is that it's not personal. It's about doing better work. It's an opportunity to show up informed with the context that you need from the context experts, which are communities. And when communities criticize people in formal and traditional roles, when employees in an organization criticize the formal leadership, that's an opportunity to be better as an organization. Here's what we've learned at All ACEs. We work with organizations across the country. We've done some international work, and there's a pattern of thinking and behavior that we see with a lot of the organizations that we have engaged with. First, we see that whenever people of color in organizations or any underestimated group in an organization are coming and saying, we're having these experiences, and there's a pattern. There's this consistent pattern of experiences people of color and underestimated groups are having in an organization. Well, it's not about the individuals having the experience. It's about the environment that the organization has created for those experiences to happen, right? That's part of the relationship between the organization and traditional power and what's happening in real life. And so if we own our responsibilities, then we say, instead of saying, well, you're a troublemaker, you're causing problems, you're creating conflict by bringing up these issues. If instead we said, that's interesting, I wonder what it is that we're doing as an organization that is facilitating those experiences, then that gives us the freedom and the space to actually innovate, to swim upstream to the systems, processes, practices, culture of the organization to see how we landed here. And I want to give you a concrete example. So two actually, and then I'm going to wrap up. So one is in society. So I mentioned kind of Black people being disproportionately impacted by police. And that's a light way to put it. We oftentimes frame it as a Black people issue, right? Like that's a problem that Black people are having. If you swim upstream, the real problem is police abuse of power, the overuse of force, over-militarization of police, the deference to people who are people like us, and when they put on the uniform, they're still people like us, with all of the human conditions that I mentioned before. And somehow we act as if that's not a real thing. And we give people the ability to not be held responsible by saying that they were in fear for their lives. When in reality, we've all been taught to be fearful of Black people. So everyone is a little bit scared of Black people, right? And so when you swim upstream to, okay, so what are these challenges that are leading to the experiences? They're actually problems that all of us should be afraid of showing up in our communities. So it's not a Black people problem, it's a societal problem. And when you really look at those, you can go look at videos for yourself, it's showing up in white communities as well. And so when we're able to connect the dots between the struggles that we're facing, when we own our leadership power, we're able to connect with each other and join forces on issues that are actually impacting all of us if we slow down and pay attention and don't let other people frame the issues for us, because that's how a lot how oppression gets reinforced. Other people define how you're supposed to show up. If you're a person of color, there's a bunch of stereotypes. You're supposed to show up that way. And then if you are a white person, there's a bunch of prototypical behavior that we call normal that you're supposed to show up with. And for people of color, it's like a weird double whammy where you're supposed to live into these stereotypes, but also you're supposed to strive for whiteness disguised as normal. And what that does to all of us and our ability to see the world clearly, to see each other clearly, to decide who we want to be for ourselves, to decide for our organizations who we want to be, to decide how we want to collectively engage with each other in meaningful, powerful ways. Second example I promised you is specific to organizations. We worked with several organizations, and one pattern that people of color were experiencing was, I'm looking at this piece of paper. It's telling me these are the list of policies, or list of things that I need to do in order to get promoted. So I followed the list of things that says I need to do to get promoted, and I'm not getting promoted, and I don't understand like what's happening here. And when we swam upstream, we tried to get to root causes, why are people having these experiences? Well, it turns out in practice, we were doing something different in the organization than what was on that piece of paper. And the only people who could figure out how to navigate are the handful of people who were able to have the relationships and kind of engage with the folks to be able to tap into this informal relationship-based way people were getting promoted, which disproportionately is always going to burden people of color because of racism. And it's also impacting white people in the organization. There's a relationship. There's a reason why disproportionate is in front of the word burden. It's a burden for all of us. People of color are going to disproportionately bear that burden, and the stakes are higher. So that said, we have all of these opportunities as leaders to reframe, to slow down, to not allow other people to define who we're supposed to be, how our organizations are supposed to be, that we take back our freedom and our power, liberate ourselves to do the work well, to engage with people as real people like us, to manage ourselves better, to have better awareness of how we're impacting other people, and own it with humility when we do negatively, because it's inevitable. There are no perfect words. There isn't one way to do everything. We're gonna make mistakes, and we just have to own it. And the last piece is around kind of the, where we have the biggest opportunity collectively, right? And so this is where I'm gonna land the plane. So in addition to humility, we also need to extend grace to people who are genuinely atoning for what they have done, the impact they've made, and they have taken the time to understand what happened, what they need to do differently moving forward, right? Because that's a part of relationships. That's part of the conflict management piece, right? And so for us to move forward collectively, we have to be able to understand, we have to be able to hold the complexity of the world and each other. We have to be able to hold the fact that we share these human conditions, and that I, as a person of color, can support without meaning to, and reinforce systems of oppression without knowing that that's what I'm doing, because we've all been infected with a lot of stuff. And if I understand that, then I know that I need to build some skills. I need to unlearn some things that I have been exposed to so that I can better engage with other people of color so that I can better engage with white people, so that I can better show up as my full self, so that I can really be in the work meaningfully and with love. And that's the same thing for white people. This is hard work to do if you don't love yourself, if you don't love the people around you. And so making sure that we're being patient with ourselves, with each other, but we're also doing the work. We're not letting ourselves off the hook, but recognizing we are going to make mistakes in this work. So I have this quote that I use it way too much, but it is my absolute favorite quote in the whole wide world. And then I'll tell you where I got it from. And if anyone has heard me speak before, you've probably heard this quote before. And it is, most people do not recognize opportunity because it comes disguised as hard work. Most people do not recognize opportunity because it comes disguised as hard work. We have an amazing opportunity right now in this moment to shift, to reimagine ourselves, our organizations, how we spend our money, how we do the work, how we engage with each other, how we listen to each other, how we partner with each other, how we get clear about strategy. I'm hoping that you will take back your power, take back and decide for yourself who you want to be. Who are you in this work? What are your values for how you navigate in this work as you begin to better understand the historical context, the social context, how it's impacting all of us? And it's not good for any of us. It's not about saving people of color. It's about us saving ourselves and collectively working together to save our communities. And so that said, I just want to say thank you for allowing me this time to be with you. It has been an honor. I will put in the chat the quote again. I'll say it one more time. Most people do not recognize opportunity because it comes disguised as hard work. And I'm sending lots of love, hope, and action to all of you as you go about your day and your journey. I hope you are able to lean into your leadership in your homes, in your families, in your organizations, because that's the kind of change we need. That is the system that we're talking about. So thank you very much. Thank you, Sharonda, for your leadership. Thank you to all of you for your leadership. Looking forward to seeing to closing out strong. Thank you.